The seminar today will give a short introduction to working at the USDA-ARS and explain the advantages of choosing this career, as well as provide some tips on how to succeed in it. To give you this overview, Dr. Tim Widmer has generously devoted some of his time to prepare and give a presentation to us all and answer any questions we may have. Dr. Widmer is the USDA-ARS National Program Leader for Plant Diseases. He is the point of contact for all USDA-ARS projects related to plant health and is involved also with antimicrobial resistance, as well as soil health and plant-related issues in food biosecurity. He is the ARS Principal Investigator for the congressionally appropriated wheat scab and predictive modeling tool initiatives. He joined USDA-ARS in 2000, where he worked as a research plant pathologist up until 2018, when he took his current position as National Program Leader. Dr. Widmer received his PhD in plant pathology at the University of Florida, Gainesville, and completed a postdoc position at Cornell University in Geneva, New York. So we will begin this webinar with a presentation from Dr. Widmer, followed by a 30-minute Q&A, during which everyone is encouraged to ask Dr. Widmer their questions. You can either type your questions in the chat or use the raise hand tool so that I can call on you for you to ask your questions. So with that, I will now hand it over to Dr. Widmer to give you a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Amber and Michelle, for inviting me. And I'm happy to give this presentation and hopefully maybe give you some ideas of what it's like to work in the USDA and ARS. And again, there'll be plenty of time for questions, and I hope again you're able to get something out of it. So I titled this, developing your career in the USDA-ARS, and then subtitled, "If I can do it, anyone can," because I truly believe that's possible. I'm not anybody special. I'm not the most intelligent person in the world either. But yet I feel like I've had a pretty successful career in ARS as well. So I just want a little bit of the structure. Maybe some of you aren't familiar with what the structure is. Of course, we have our secretary and then our undersecretary of research, education, and economics. And then under Dr. Shavonna Jacobs-Young is our administrator for the Agricultural Research Service, Dr. Simon Liu. And then we break it out into two associate administrators. We have Mr. June Park, who's actually the acting associate administrator, who's on the research operations side. And then Dr. Stephen Kappas, who is our associate administrator on the national programs. And then those are broken up into four programs where plants and crops, and that's where I'm under. And these are overseen by our deputy administrators. We have one for animal production, natural resources, and then foods and nutrition. And then just to give you just a very overview of where we fit in, and I think if I can, let's see, change my pointer, maybe you can see, yeah. Here's where we're at, the Agricultural Research Service. And you can see, if you're interested, if you know of APHIS, Animal and Health Plant Inspection Service, and the Forest Service, and then all the other different agencies that are underneath the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So you can see it's a pretty big organization. Our budget, however, for the Agricultural Research Service is actually fairly small. It is increased, and it's about $1.7 billion annually right now. So I'm just going to, again, this may not be as much of an interest to you, but a lot of people, well, what do we do in the Office of National Programs? It seems to be a kind of a mystery. we're on the administration side. So what do national program leaders like myself actually do? Well, we lead the programs, and I mentioned those 4 programs. And then within those 4 programs, we have certain subdivisions, and I'll go over that in a little bit as well. But we champion the programs. We're the ones that promote the research. We help coordinate and communicate, not only within the agency, but also international partners and stakeholders. We provide programmatic approvals, such as vacant, what we call SY positions, which are our scientist positions. We write news articles, we approve agreements, variety releases, invention reports, and we also write budget initiatives. And then one of the focuses for fiscal year 2024 is plant health, and we have a new initiative, hopefully, that is in the president's budget and will get passed this year. And then we respond to urgent issues, and this is always a lot of what my job is, responding to urgent issues. Not all of it is resource limited, but just papers have come up that we need to review, programs and such, and so this is a lot of what I do. And then we also assess our programs, and we look at every project yearly for their accomplishments, just to make sure that they're on track. And then, of course, we do write reports. We write briefing papers for Congress and others and our stakeholders who may want information on our programs. So how is ARS research and how is that prioritized? How does the budget work on that? Well, there's many different inputs onto that. And so, of course, the executive branch, it's the president and the Department of Agriculture, the Secretary of Agriculture, that they're the ones that really solidify that research and the budgets. But then, it comes into play with Congress, who must approve it, and also sets priorities for us. Our customers and stakeholders are really our main drivers in what we do. We're a very stakeholder-driven research, and that really sets what priorities we have for our research programs. And then, of course, other scientific communities, and then agency scientists and leaders. And then, of course, that drives our base funding, our allocations, and also other new budget initiatives that we are trying to propose. And then here's the cycle, because every 5 years we review each and every one of our projects, and it is a quite an ordeal. It's quite a process as we go through, because basically what we do is we ask for input into our research program planning and priority setting. We get our stakeholders together. We make a presentation, and then we go through, and then we look at the scientific merit, the project implementation, what the program is being coordinated, and then the quality. And then so this is a 5-year cycle, and we can reevaluate our programs every 5 years, whether they are meeting the stakeholder needs, whether they're actually addressing what they want us to look at. I kind of showed this earlier. This is just the 4 programs, coordination of ARS national programs. And then under crop production and protection, where I'm at, I'm the national program leader for plant diseases, which is, we've labeled National Program 303. But we also have a program, Plant Genetic Resources, Genomics, Genetic Improvement. That's where a lot of our breeding programs are. We work very closely in plant diseases with that. Crop production and quarantine. This is a lot where our entomology, our invasive species, and then crop production, where we're looking at also, again, incorporating a lot of the breeding programs that we do to increase our farmers' yields for economics and also food security. And then scientists, and most of my talk, I think, is unfortunately it's going to be focused on National Program 303, just because that's what I'm more familiar with. But a lot of what I say is applicable to all programs within ARS. But then within scientists that we look for example, in National Program 303, it's very broad. So we look of course, for plant pathologists, molecular biologists, plant physiologists, geneticists, and entomologists as well. And so, and these are pretty, the way the other programs are set, a lot of molecular biologists and geneticists, of course, agronomists, those kind of personnel are what mainly are the job descriptions that we have. And so across the country, you can see here where the pins are, that's where we have our projects in National Program 303. So we have about 55 projects in 29 locations. But overall, ARS has over 90 plus locations, including some international locations as well. And so you can see across the country where all these white dots are, that's where ARS has locations, including Puerto Rico and Hawaii, of course, as well. We do not at this point have any projects directly up in Alaska, but we do collaborations with them as well. And I think, though, that we have maybe also in Vermont, although I think we're trying to establish some projects there, and that's the other state that we do not have any current projects. But again, we collaborate with the universities on projects. So we do have a presence there. Just specifically, we developed these action plans. We just completed the one in program 303 back in 2022. It's good for another 5 years. However, probably in another 2 years, we'll start the process. It takes about 2 or 3 years to start the process of getting all this done. It's a very complex and process and takes a lot of time, a lot of writing these project plans set for 5 years, which are usually about 40 or 50 pages in total length, not including letters of collaboration and references. But you can see that there's 3 different components in this one. Again, it just shows you the structure of what our action plans are like. For example, we're looking at plant pathogen resources, systematics, genomics, and diagnostics. Component 2 deals with the biology, ecology, and epidemiology of plant pathogens. And then component 3 is the plant health management. And you can see individually where we break it out into different problem statements within that as well. But we are a very stakeholder-driven research organization. And this was just after we completed our review of our 2015 to 2020 projects. I was asked to write this article that was published in Phytopathology, and it shows what the impacts of our research is on plant pathology in that 5-year time frame. So what kind of research activities, at least again in National Program 303, are we doing? Well, we look at the types of research. It's about split between basic and applied research with some developmental research in there as well. And then the pathogen type, the vast majority of it is fungi, and then it's split fairly evenly between viruses and bacteria, and then nematodes and oomycetes, and then phytoplasmas. We don't have much in there, but it is a very important pathogen group. And then if we look at management options, what type of management options are we focused on? A lot of it, 50%, is focused on breeding and developing resistance, whether by traditional breeding methods, by new technologies. So that's a huge component of our national program. And then we also, of course, look at fungicides, amendments, and cover crops, and then biological control, and then other methods make up that rest of that 50%. International collaborations, we have in those past 5 years, we had over 1,000 research collaborations with other nations. You can see the individual nations listed here, and then the breakout of where those are coming from, a large portion coming from Asia and Europe, and then others in the Americas, with, of course, Africa and Oceania and the Middle East also having a significant amount of collaborations. International collaborations are extremely important to us because we cannot have a presence anywhere, but it is a global system. And so we in order for us to be proactive and develop a food security for the whole world, it's important that we establish and work on these international collaborations. So what are some of the National Program 303 research priorities that we're actually focused on and maybe, I guess, concerned about, and what things do we foresee? Well, new and emerging pathogens and diseases, of course, by characterization and diagnostics. Impacts due to climate change, which we look at modeling resiliency, again, host resistance, how that is going to hold up under climate change. And then new technologies, looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning, language application, nanotechnology, and then other new technologies and management options such as RNAi, biological control, which may not be a new technology, but how can we incorporate some of these new technologies into biological control, such as even gene drive technologies. And then, of course, resistance. And that works very closely with our National Program 303, which we call the grain crops program, because a lot of it, of course, is breeding for wheat, corn, pulses, and things like that, crops that are very staples of the American lifestyle and food supply. I mentioned collaborative research. In ARS, we highly depend upon collaborations, and that, of course, includes universities, private companies, state and local governments, federal agencies, and international partners. I've thrown up just some of the ones here. They're logos of ones that we are working with. And of course, we have initiatives. And of course, you're all aware of the U.S. Wheat and Barley Scab Initiative. That is an extremely important and a great model of how we use that to look at other initiatives, such as the National Predictive Modeling Tool Initiative, which is designed to predict diseases for corn, cotton, and wheat. And then also the National Disease Recovery System, which is designed to look at new and emerging plant pathogens and plant diseases. And then, of course, we do partner with the other federal agencies. I showed you that flow chart, that tree that showed the different agencies, and then our other federal partners work very closely together with us. APHIS, the Animal Plant and Health Inspection Service, NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, which is our extramural funding agency, and then the Forest Service, which is responsible for plant health issues on trees in our national forests. So now I'm going to focus on careers, and that's probably where maybe most of your interests are, but I wanted to give you at least this background to show what our programs are and what we're focused on, and hopefully stimulate some of your interests as well in that. So my career path has gone quite a ways around. I did my graduate school here at the University of Florida, and then I did a postdoc position up here at Cornell in Geneva, New York. And then my first ARS position was the lab in Montpellier, France. This is a lab that's dedicated to working on biological control of invasive species. So I spent 6 years there. But we're only allowed to stay 6 years in a foreign country. And so then I was relocated back to what was my current location, which was the lab in Fort Detrick, Maryland, where I worked from 2006 to 2018, as Peter had mentioned in my introductory bio. And then after that, in 2018, I stayed around in the area because I now work in our headquarters, which is located in Beltsville, Maryland, which is not that far from Fort Detrick. So my career path, I went from graduate studies to postdoctoral positions, scientist, and now national program leader. But my projects, I was always interested in traveling and international work, and you can see here where my ARS career has led me through all of these different locations throughout the world. I've been very fortunate to have had that opportunity to travel, and not only in international meetings, which some of these are, but also develop collaborations with some of these international partners. So my personal goal and my advice is to diversify projects at each step. So when I was in graduate studies, I was working on a Phytophthora disease on citrus, Florida. But then when I moved up and did my postdoc, I was actually working on a nematode on carrots. But the theme that I had always was sustainable agriculture, biological control. But I just changed my path of systems, I guess, and this gives you more tools in your toolbox, things on your resume to help to expand your opportunities for careers. Because once you get that PhD, you're often locked into that topic. It's very difficult to expand out. Let's say you're in the plant world and you want to go now into animals. Well, it's going to be extremely difficult for that. It does happen, but because you have that PhD, so you have to make sure that you know what you want when you get that PhD. But then when you're doing your PhD and looking at a postdoc position, see how can you expand your horizon so that you can make yourself more marketable or give you more opportunities for a more permanent career, because the postdoc is a great opportunity to build up your skill set. Mine, and I wish I would have done this. Moving up, molecular biology was just starting, but I did not take advantage of that. And so if I had done it maybe over again, I would look maybe in a postdoc position, maybe that was more focused on molecular biology, because I don't have that skill. And I think it would have been even more valuable to me. It would have helped me in my research career. I know it would have, but that's the way it is. And now national program leader, I don't do physical research anymore, but I am involved in research. And I was telling Peter this earlier, and I'm involved in research in ways that I never would be involved with as a scientist, because as I mentioned, I did my graduate work on Phytophthora. I had some nematode experience. As a scientist, I was again working mainly on Phytophthora, but now I'm a virologist, I'm a bacteriologist, I'm a molecular biologist. I'm not an expert on those. I have scientists that are experts, and I can tap into their knowledge. I just need to know what they're doing so that I can help coordinate and get the information that I need. So now I want to try and give a little comparison between USDA-ARS, academia, and the private industry. And I don't have much experience with academia and private, so don't hold me to these. These aren't solid and fast points that I'm going to make. There is a lot of flexibility within all of these, and so but these are my perceptions of what they are. And so the first comparison is the research. In ARS, we are stakeholder driven. That's our projects. In academia, you have a little more freedom to decide what you're going to be working on. And then in the private industry, my understanding is they're very defined. You're basically given a project and you go with it, and that's what you're going to be working on. You're not going to deviate from that. And so it's a little more restricted, but some people like that. And so again, none of these are negative, and I'll get into the negative side of the USDA later. But on these points, I'm not saying any of these are negative, because each person has their own thought and want of what they would like to do. So, and then another one, a comparison is our funding, the budget. So in the USDA, we have appropriated funds that support basic research and all salary. we don't have to worry about getting outside grants. It's encouraged, and if you really want to build your program and expand it, then yes, you very well might need to, but you don't need it. And that's and that's a good plus. In the academia, that you're dependent upon grants and outside funding to support your research and even some of your salary, from my understanding. Especially during those summer months, if you're on like a 9-month appointment, then you must, supplement that with usually with grants for those extra 3 months that the university is not paying. And then in the private, it's very defined. Again, the budgets are usually set, and maybe you can request increase in budgets if good progress is being made on your project. But they are also usually very defined, and what they are. And so there is career advancement in all three. I think all of them have career advancement. In USDA, we definitely can advance in our career. We call them grade service levels, GS. Of course, in academia, you're associate, assistant, and full professor. And then within the private industry, you can be project manager, and then directors, and so you can move up in that career as well. Now, in the student life in USDA, there is limited student mentoring, especially if you're co-located on a university campus. Then there's more opportunities than if you're not. And of course, academia, well, there's all kinds of opportunities for student mentoring. And then in the private industry, as well as my understanding, there is also some limited student mentoring, especially during maybe the summer months when they do an internship, and that's opportunities as well in private companies. And then publications. Well, both in USDA and academia, really that's what we live on. That's how we're evaluated as scientists. And that has a lot to do with our promotion and how we advance our careers. We're judged a lot on our publications, not strictly on that, especially on the USDA side, as we do focus a lot also on impact, but publications on a year-to-year basis are critical for our scientists in the USDA as well. And then in the private industry, they're a lot more restricted, again, depending on the private industry. Where they're, of course, trying to protect their intellectual property rights. And so they're not as forthcoming in wanting to publish some material, and that's understandable, again. But there could be other, benefits I didn't mention on that, where maybe you get more patents as well in the private industry. And then, financial gains. Well, there is a limited bonus potential in the USDA. I'm not aware of academia having bonuses. I could be wrong on that. There is recognitions for sure, and maybe somebody will correct me, or I'm not thinking of how that actually works in the academia system. And then in the private industry, my understanding is there is also some good potential for bonuses depending upon your performance as well. And then what kind of a networking system? Well, in the USDA, we have a very well-established national and international network, and it's easy to plug into that. While in the academia, you really have to develop that yourself. By going to societal meetings, of course, you can develop that national and international network, but it's usually upon you yourself, to get that going, make those connections, to reach out. And then in the private industry, I think it really depends upon the company. Some of them have especially if they have more international partners or subunits outside of the U.S., where different subsidiaries and such outside of the country, and within even the U.S., and that network can also be developed with that. So careers at ARS. So maybe this is what most of us are interested in. what kind of vacancies are out there right now. There are, at the scientist level, we have right now 28 scientist position vacancies. That is out of 161 positions, just in National Program 303. That is the number I could get, and that's about a 17% vacancy rate. For the agency overall, it's 18%, so it's pretty similar. But these vacancies also include technicians, support staff, administration work. So it's not just scientist positions that one can have a career in ARS. There are some, you don't need a PhD to work in ARS. And our support staff and technicians are a valuable asset that we have. So how do you go about looking at and getting what's out there for USDA? We do all of our jobs in this website, USA Jobs. So you can search for jobs. You can, if you would, you can scroll down and filter certain things depending. Maybe you're looking at only a certain location that you're interested in, or a certain type of position. So you can focus in on that. And I believe you can set it up here where you can get alerts so that when a position that you have put in a keyword becomes available, it will send you an email saying, hey, this is a position that you might be interested in applying for. But all of our jobs go through USA Jobs. Now, there may be other opportunities to hear about jobs, especially at postdocs in societal meetings. You'll see people posting, job announcements. I need a postdoc, or I'm looking for, a technician, or word of mouth. Or let's say, you're living in a location in a city that has an ARS lab. Feel free to reach out to, the research leader or some of the scientists and say, hey, do you have any openings, maybe at the technician level, especially if you're, at that or support scientist level. Do you have any openings that, in your unit that I might be able to apply for? And again, they might say, yeah, go on to USA Jobs and here's the job announcement number, and look at it that way. And then here you can see on this website, and I posted the address. It's ars.usda.gov career information. It kind of goes through the process. Now, I'm not sure how up to date this link is, to be honest with you, because I tried to select one of these things and it gave me somewhere weird. But if you go on our Agricultural Research Service webpage, you can find a lot of information about careers in ARS, employment benefits, and family-friendly programs as well. The one thing, though, that for a scientist position, and I think, although I could not verify for a postdoc position, it must be U.S. citizens. I know for a scientist position, it has to be a postdoc. I'm not clear, and I understand they may be even reconsidering whether that has to be the case or not. And I'm sorry, I just couldn't find that exact information. But if you're interested, it will say it in the job announcement whether it is required to be a U.S. citizen or not. So what are the promotion opportunities within ARS? Well, I'm going to start with at the scientist level. So maybe as I mentioned, we do these what we call grade service levels. So usually if you're hired as a postdoc, you may start as a GS 11, maybe a GS 12, depending upon how much further research experience you've had. And then when you're a scientist, you always start usually at a GS 12 when you're just starting out. And then I think within the first 3 years, you're evaluated what we call a performance position description, where basically you put a case together and it's evaluated by a panel that determines whether this position, we don't promote people, we promote positions. It's a fine line, but they determine whether that position that you're in should be moved up to the next grade level. So we go from a GS-12 to a GS-13, and then after 5 years, you're eligible to be, again, the position is able to be reevaluated, and if approved, you can go up to a GS-14. And then after another, I think it's another 5 years, you can be reevaluated again to go up to a GS-15. And that's the top level for the scientists. We do have something we call super grades, but there's very limited positions for that. And usually somebody has to retire to open up a new position. So it's not something that is very, very common. So a lot of the promotion opportunities, I said, depends upon publication, impact, your international experience and collaboration, and just, you know, your overall contribution to the field of science. Those all play into factors of the promotion opportunities. At below the scientist level, we also have the GS, the grade service system. So depending upon, again, usually whether you're just coming out of a bachelor's degree or whether maybe you've had a master's, you either start usually at a GS-5 and you can work yourself up. Sometimes, again, as a master's student, you may start as a GS-7 or a GS-9. And then usually support scientists are often promoted up to a GS-11. And so that's, and those usually support scientists are usually at the master's level. There's a few with PhD, you know, depending upon their system, their family situation, whatever, they may be extremely happy with that. And so they're again, it's the position that is moved up within the grade level for promotion. So now I'm going to go over the ugly, the bad, and the good. And usually you hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, but I want to end on a good note. So I want to start with the ugly portion of working for ARS. Okay, well, it's the obvious. It's the government bureaucracy. I mean, it does exist. It ties up things, and it's difficult to change the system. You know, this is a machine that's been going on for years and years and years, and you know it's hard to change it. And so and some people can feel that drag and get stuck in it, and that's the ugly side. And you know, and because some of these regulations that agricultural research ARS is caught under is not just ARS, it's USDA wide. You know, so, and you saw that flow chart. There's a lot of different agencies within the Department of Agriculture, and so to try and cover all of those and have one regulation just fit ARS, it's not possible. And so sometimes it doesn't seem practical. It's like, well, why is that happening? But it just doesn't make sense. But yet that's the government system. So that's the ugly portion of it. I mean, when you realize that, you know, sometimes it's just out of your control, it kind of takes that, I guess, that negative part out of it, because there's just nothing you can do about it. I mean, and to fight the system, sometimes it's not as easy. Now, sometimes you may have to. I'm not saying that, but you know, that's the ugly side. So the bad side, and a lot of our projects, I'm going to say on the bad side, maybe it's bad, maybe it's not, but they're usually pretty defined, because our projects, as I said, are stakeholder driven. We want to work what the stakeholders want us to do, and so we don't have that academic freedom that you may have in the university system. We do have some freedom where we can branch out a little bit if it's related to what the objectives are that we are assigned to do. But you know, the thing is, we know what those are when we're hired. It's well defined. So you know, for someone to come in and get a position and then complain about what research they're doing, it's not so valid, because you knew what you were getting into when you were hired. And so, but yet, you know, we don't always have that academic freedom, and in doing exactly what we wanted to do. And then also we are a matrix managed system. So I showed you the hierarchy of Office of National Programs, where we have our associate administrators and our deputy administrators, and then when I'm under the national program leaders, and then the scientists. But within that, we have our area offices also. So we have 5 area offices, and they're actually responsible for the personnel, for the budgets, to distribute the budgets. And so there's sometimes some conflict between Office of National Programs and the area offices in trying to direct what the scientist can do. And so they're using that matrix management style. It's good in some ways, but it also can be bad. So now onto the good portion, and this is where because I've worked now for ARS for over 23 years, and it's been very, very good to me. And so there have been lots of opportunities, and the benefits are one of the main, I think, perks. This working for ARS and working for USDA is one of the few minions out there that actually still has a pension. You are able to collect a government pension, and there's not many, even in private companies, that have that anymore. You have to put away your own money in the 401k. You can do that also in ARS, but yet you also contribute to a pension. We have great health benefits, and so that's included, life insurance, disability. All of those are a really good plus for the benefit side, for the quality of life side that I say. And then depending on how many years you worked in the government, you can even maybe even retire earlier. Say, some people that I know that have worked maybe already 30, 35 years in the government can retire when they're 55 with a pretty good pension, and then look for another position and supplement that pension. So there's that benefit as well. And the way it works for that portion is they take your highest 3 salaries, and then you get a percentage point for every year that you work for the government. So let's say on average your salaries were $100,000 per year, and you worked for the government for 30 years, and this can include postdocs. That counts as a part of the government pension plan. That would count if you get a full-time position then. And if you work 30 years, that would be 30% of 100,000. You would get basically $30,000 per year in that pension plan, plus whatever money then you are maybe collecting from Social Security, and also from your retirement account that you may want to start drawing down as well. And then the other good part is, I mentioned this a little bit, is our research budget. Well, it's adequate. I should maybe have put this maybe bad and good. It's adequate. You can get your research done, and we design our projects so that you can get your research projects done with the budget that has been allocated for that unit. It's set. You don't have to worry about getting outside funds. A lot of my understanding, and a lot of my friends who are in university professors, they're spending most of their time trying to write grants. They're not in the lab doing research. They're writing grants. And now this isn't always the case, but in ARS, that's not a necessity. If you're a hands-on person, if you want to be in the lab, then ARS is a great place to work, because you have that opportunity to be always in the lab and to do your work. You're not a lab manager per se. You're an actual scientist working in the lab. And most of our positions, our scientist positions, have technical support. Now, not all of them do, because some budgets are a little less, and just the way the finances are, some of the locations cost a little more money, so it takes away some of those research dollars. But I would say the vast majority of our scientists have at least one technician assigned to them in their research support program. I mentioned the promotion potential already, and it is a stable position. Once you are hired in the government, you really decide when you want to leave. It's extremely difficult to get fired or laid off from the government. It can happen under extreme circumstances, either by there's something that you do that's against the regulations, like cheat on your timesheet or something like that. That can get you fired, or under a severe downturn, economic downturn, where we have to cut back and close locations, even though we try and relocate people. That has, unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't always happen that way. The good side is, in the last, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years, we have not had to close down any locations. Our budget has increased steadily, where we've not had to deal with that, and I hope we don't have to deal with that anymore, because it really is a morale buster. And then the final good portion that I'm going to mention, if you are co-located at a university, you often will also be granted adjunct faculty position at that university. Most of our scientists who are co-located in a university have that adjunct professor title as well. And I think that gives you a little more benefits and flexibility for students as well, maybe even giving some class lectures. And it's another thing, to help build collaborations, because sometimes that helps with, working with other university and faculty members. So, and at that point, that is the last slide that I have. You see my contact information and my cell phone number. I'm located in the George Washington Carver Center in Beltsville, Maryland, although I'm working from home maybe 4 or 5 days a week also. But at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we can open up to questions, Peter, if that's the way you want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Widmer. You really covered the breadth of topics that I wanted to know about. I still have quite a few questions, and so I'm sure a lot of the other audience does as well. So we'll move into the Q&A session. So if you have any questions as an audience member, you can either raise your hand or type your question into the Q&A chat, and I will try to keep a close eye on it. Looks like we already have a question from Mei Wang, and she asks, what platform you usually post job opportunities, and how long usually does it take for screening candidates for a job?
Yeah, great question. So our platform, as I mentioned, is almost always, especially for the scientist position, is that USA Jobs. That's where you're going to find all of our positions. Sometimes if you're, let's say, and I don't know your background, if you're a member of the American Phytopathology Society meeting, you will often see there's a electronic bulletin board that job opportunities will come posted up as well. And we often, sometimes depending upon the position, we may even advertise it in trade journals like phytopathology or other journals pertinent to that position. Your next part of your question, how long does it take to screen candidates? This I should have put into the ugly part, because this to me is a stickler and something I really don't like about ARS, and maybe it's USDA wide, I don't know. It takes too long, and in fact we lose a lot of our candidates because it seems when you apply for these positions, it goes into a black hole and you don't hear, and you may not hear for months what's the process, and if you're not selected for let's say an interview, it may be even a half a year or even a year before you're notified that you weren't selected. And they do that. I understand maybe why they do that, because let's say let's say there's 20 candidates, and they select 3 of them for interviews, and then that in itself usually takes, by the time the application closes to when the interviews start, and we're trying to move this faster along. We have, I think, increased that. That could still take maybe more than a month. By the time our HR department, human resources department, screens the selections to make sure that they're actually qualified for the positions, because we get a lot of applications that are not qualified for the position at all. So we have to screen those, or their application is incomplete. And then after that, it goes to the location where the committee will then, review the candidates' applications. They may decide upon, let's say 3 or 4, depending upon, what they get. And then, setting up the interviews. Now we're starting to go back in-person interviews again, which is a good thing. Before, during the last 2 or 3 years, it was all virtual. It's good and bad, but I think it's bad for the applicant, because you don't get to see the location. And, not only are you interviewing are they interviewing you for the position, but you're also interviewing the ARS. Maybe you don't want to work in that lab once you see it, or you get to talking with the actual research project. It's not of interest to you. So the interview process goes both ways. But so that takes probably a month and a half. And then the committee gets together, and they're usually pretty quick on deciding what they want. And then the person who they make it up, the chain of ladder for approval, and that usually takes maybe just a week or so. And then it goes out to the human resources department after that. They contact the applicant that says, okay, we're going to make you a tentative offer. And then there's, can be negotiations and such, and you have time. And then usually then, let's say you accept it. And then you can negotiate, okay, I'm trying to wrap up something here. Can I start in 3 or 6 months? Okay. All during that time, anytime a person can say, no, I don't want the position anymore, we got to start over again. And so those people who weren't selected can be then considered again. So let's say we had a second choice person. And that's why we don't want to tell the people, sorry, you weren't selected. But to me, it does them a disservice, and I don't like that system. We're all professionals that sometimes we don't get the positions, and we recognize that, and we move on, and we look for the next position. But not to be informed of the process is something that I don't like, and I should have put that maybe on the ugly side. So I hope that answered your question, May, and I hope it doesn't discourage you, because again, we want we want good candidates. We need good candidates, and so but it is a system, and it's the government system. Let me put it that way. And I mentioned that in the ugly part.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Widmer. We got another question from the audience from Lovepreet Singh, and he asks, can you mention some skills that were helpful for you in transitioning from a scientist to national program leader position?
Yeah, great. That's another good question. What were some skills that helped me transition? I think being a people person is one thing, and whether that's a skill you can develop, or whether you have it or you don't. I think that's that, and wanting to be in a leadership role is another skill. Some people don't want that, and that's fine, because that's another responsibility, and maybe it's better to be focused on your own research program rather than responsible for hundreds of other research programs. And then I think flexibility, good listening skills. And as I mentioned, in my opening slide, if I can do it, anyone can. being the most intelligent person isn't one of those skills I think that's required. And having I don't have a photographic memory, but one of my skills that I always say that I do have is I know how to find something out. I know who to reach out to. I know how to Google it, so that I can find the information. And that's what program leaders are. They're information gatherers a lot. We need to know who we can reach out to get the information, so that we can then, give it up to our leadership. And that's one of the most important, I think, positions, and probably skills, that for a national program leader, to have. But it's not for everybody. And so at some point in your career, if you're interested, in leadership positions, there are opportunities to build and promote that within ARS as well. So you can have a research position, you can be the lead scientist on a project, and you're basically responsible for helping to design and write and gather the information from the other scientists and put it into a document so that it moves up the chain. And then also there's research leaders, and they're responsible for the overall unit. You oversee and you are supervisor for the other scientists, and you help decide the direction of the research. You work very closely with the area office and with the national program leaders, as well. So there are leadership advancement opportunities within ARS, as well. And that may sometimes give you a good feel, oh, do I want to then, move into maybe a more administration like an Office of National Program Leader. And there are opportunities to do details, maybe 3-month details where you can, come and shadow or work with us in national programs. And then you'll get a good sense. And that's what I did actually. Before I had the position, I did a detail for 3 months. And it gave me a good sense of, oh, I kind of like this work. And a lot of people who come and do detail say, no, that's not for me. But then they find that out. And so that's the opportunities that you can move up and get promoted within the Office of National Programs as well.
Okay. Thank you for your response again. Another question from Abia Navaska, and she was wondering what jobs are usually open for non-American citizens?
Yeah, in ARS, it's tough. And again, I'm sorry, I tried to find this information to clarify because for the postdoc position, there might be, and I would have to delve into that further and try and get human resources to find that out, because at one point I didn't think there was that opportunity, but then I had in the back of my mind that in some locations it might be okay depending upon the security levels, and then someone told me, well, it's not, but yet they're considering whether to change that, because we're missing out on a lot of great scientists by not allowing international non-US citizens to work in ARS labs. But so what opportunities are there? Well, there are visiting scientists, and there are definitely international collaborations. If you go back and get a position within your country, and you've made connections, you've made a good network, let's say in the US, and you can set up good collaborations. We have an Office of International Research Engagement and cooperation, and so they're focused on the international aspect, and so they're just not probably full-time opportunities for non-US citizens, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, thank you again. It looks like there are not.
I see.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had my hand raised.
Sorry.
No problem. I just want to say thank you for the talk. It was really informative. I had some questions about like job opportunities and how much like the USDA jobs take in like prior experience. For example, like you'll see some industry jobs that are like PhD required or a master's with 5+ years of experience. Is the USDA, since like it is a government position, like pretty strict? If like a PhD is required, you couldn't possibly get that position with like a master's and 5 or so years of experience.
So are you talking about a scientist position?
Yes.
Yes, okay. For the most part, yes, but I know of people who have not had a PhD and have moved up in the system to actually have gotten a research position like myself. So it is possible. And the way you may see on the job announcements for some positions, especially if they're offered at a GS-12, which is usually our starting position, it's our basic research position. It may say PhD or qualified experience. And so it doesn't always have to be a PhD. Now, you may be at a disadvantage by not having it. Yes. I don't think there's any way around that, because you may be competing with people who have done postdocs and have also that plus experience, as well. But there are opportunities to have that work experience, especially if it's directed towards exactly where what the position description is for. Then yes, there are opportunities for that. So yeah, good question.
Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
I do see somebody had a non-citizen postdocs can be hired through university and work at USDA, and there's the ARS pathway. Yes, that, and I think that too is why I was thinking that non-citizens could work. So there is, yes, they can be hired through a university and work in an ARS lab, but it's not, if you do not become eligible for the benefits of ARS. Then you're with the benefits of ORISE or the university. So that's, you can work in an ARS lab, but you're technically not an ARS employee.
Thanks, Tim. Well, I actually I have a question too. It's it's unrelated, but like I know in academia you can do industry sort of like work outside of academia on the side. Can you do similar kinds of work, with industry if you also work a government position, USDA-ARS position, or is it more restrictive?
Yeah, it's more restricted. You're not allowed to have any outside positions, and you're not allowed to have any outside paid positions. Even if you work, let's say, volunteer for a nonprofit or something like that, there are limitations even on that, especially if you have fiduciary responsibilities. And so that is one of the restrictions of working for the government, is you're not allowed to have other outside positions.
Well, that was a good, quick answer.
Yeah.
So looking in the chat, looks like there aren't questions. I do have a couple more, and maybe we'll have just time for one more after that, and we can close off. So I was curious. So how did you personally get involved in international collaborations? That's something that you sort of led yourself and took, the own initiative to do? Or
Yes and no. So yes, it was always an interest of me, even when I was in graduate school, to work internationally. And then I was fortunate in my postdoc position that there was an international component as well, and that helped me then on my resume to apply for the position in France, and that gave me that opportunity. So there are opportunities out there, and I think the best way to I guess put yourself out there is to make sure that that's known, that you're interested in that. maybe, if you're a PhD and you're, major professor, you mentioned that, if there's international, portion of the project, I would love to be involved with that. Or on a postdoc, maybe you're hired for something, specific, and that's what I was. I was hired to work on nematodes and carrots, but yet my postdoc advisor, he was involved in rice wheat decline in Southeast Asia, and so I was interested, and I said I'd love to get involved with that, and so he put me on many different trips and part of that project while I was still doing my other project, of course, but yet so you kind of have to insert yourself. You have to make it known that you're interested in that, but I think there are opportunities, for building on that. They're not always out there, but yet, I think there are enough that you can do that.
Thanks a lot. I'll just ask one last question, and if there are no other questions, maybe we'll end it right there. I see it's getting a little late. So my last question is sort of how much does the funding, I guess, that you receive to distribute out, how much does it vary year to year? And have there ever been years where there was like a change in the political landscape where you've seen like reductions, like maybe dramatic, or has it been pretty consistent?
Year to year, it very rarely changes. Unless you get an increase, and then that helps. And there have been years, I remember back in, must have been 2008, 2010, when the economy turned, we had a sequestration. We were supposed to, reduce our budgets by, 10%. Fortunately, we could reduce our budgets, a lot of our budgets, by abolishing positions that had retired people. People had already retired. They were vacant. So a lot of people didn't lose their jobs, actually. We just didn't fill the positions that we, hopefully could have had. And so, but now, since that time, we are building back up positions. And so it is a great time really to get hired again. Now, of course, the economic, I would say more than the political, it's the economic situation that really determines that setting. And as I mentioned, we haven't had to consider, closing any location in the last, 5 or 6 years. And I'm trying to even think before that, it's probably been 8 or 9 years before we actually ever had to close a location, because we've put it into even plans, but then that didn't materialize. We didn't have to do that in the end. So the research budgets that you have are pretty stable, and even with the cost of living increases that you normally get, in salaries and such, and that eats away a little bit of our dollars, of course, but yet, it's pretty consistent. And we've been fortunate in the last, 3 or 4 years in ARS to have, slight increases in budget. I think this last year we had about 100 million increase in budget, so we're about 1.7 billion now. Just back in, I think it was, I want to say 2008, 2009, we were around 900 million. So we've almost doubled our budget since then. And that shows the value that Congress and our stakeholders give to ARS, that they've, seen that value and have supported an increase in budget for our research activities, because we are the research arm. That's all we do. We're not the policy setters, and we do the research that sets the policies, but we don't make the policies ourselves.
Well, that's a great note to end it on. Great news for postdocs and graduate students wanting to go into USDA. So thank you very much, Tim, for coming here, devoting your time to answer our questions and give us a bit of insight into the USDA. We will definitely be posting this recording online, in the days to come, so that other people who missed who registered but could missed or who even didn't register can see what you presented. So thank you very much. And
Well, thank you again, Peter, for having me, and Amber and Michelle and everyone who attended. I enjoyed it very much, and it is a great opportunity, I think, to work in ARS. I can't, stress that enough. We're looking for good scientists. We're looking for good postdocs, and so please consider us when you're applying for a position.
thank you.